Hello, Game Cooker US Rocks VR here. I'm going to try to make this video as smooth as possible so I don't have to edit it. I was trying to live stream, but I still can't live stream through my Nvidia Shadow Play for some reason. It just does not like this computer. So I'm doing a pre-recording, I guess. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm sitting out here at the pool. It's very hot out right now. It must be 80 degrees out here. I mean, at least. I want to take this shirt off, but for the sake of the video, I put it back on. So what I wanted to do is just kind of look at the new Nvidia Super cards and the differences between, the different cards and the cards that they're replacing. So, if you haven't heard, Nvidia brought out their Super Series today, officially, and I'm sure there's reviews already out on YouTube. I did watch some. There seemed to be still some bias against them. I don't know why. I mean, everybody was crying, and Nvidia, went ahead and upgraded the cards. So there should really be no complaints, but you can't control people's feelings, I guess. So what I'm going to do is just kind of show you the differences on paper between the different cards. And I'm going to start out here with the GeForce RTX 2060. Here on the left you got the 2060, and on the right you have the Super. And you can see there's a slight difference between the two. The regular 2060 has 1920 CUDA cores, whereas the Super has 2176. So it's not a whole lot more, It's a little over, 200 50 or whatever it is, CUDA cores. Now there was some questions about whether, they increased the amount of RTX cores. And the answer is yes. But I have to look at the 2070, after this, and we'll see what that one has. But so the regular 2060 had 37, I guess RTX cores, and can do 5 gigaarrays a second. And the 2060 Super has 41 RTX cores, or whatever you want to call them, the ray tracing cores. Although that might be, well, this says operations, so that's not really cores. So forgive me for saying that. But anyway, this is the number that you're looking at here, 37T. Okay, this one's got 41T, so it's 4 more than the 2060, which gives you an extra gigaray per second. So a gigaray is 1,000 rays per second. So, there's a slight bump in the ray tracing capability. The memory speed is the same. Now, compared to the regular 2060, the 2060 Super is going to have 2 more gigabytes of GDDR6. So again, everybody was crying about why did they release a card with 6 gigs. Well, now it has 8 gigs, and they also increased the memory interface width from 192-bit to 256-bit. So that's quite a bit. So you're going, your memory bandwidth is going from 336 to 448 gigabits per second. So that's pretty big jump. That's over 100 gigabits per second more. I mean, that's quite a jump. And then everything else basically is the same. I mean, I don't think there's really going to be much difference. The wattage changed though slightly. So recommended system power here is 500 watts, whereas the 2060 Super is 550. So that's not really that much difference. 15 more watts on the card itself. So nothing terrible. So, on paper, the 2060 Super, will be not slightly faster, but it'll have a significant jump. I mean, the memory bandwidth itself is going to give it a nice kick, You also have the extra 2 gigs of RAM if you need it. I don't know if that's really going to matter a whole lot. I mean, well, for some games, I guess. And then it's got more CUDA cores. So between the memory bandwidth and the CUDA cores, you would see a pretty noticeable jump in performance. From what I've been hearing out in the wild so far is that the 2060 Super performs about as well as the RTX 2070 did. So it's performing one more tier higher. And the good thing about the Super here is it's only going to be $399. So the price didn't really change. They already took the price off here because they don't. They're not carrying the regular 2060 anymore. So when these are sold out, then this is the only one that's going to be for sale. So right now they're not in stock. Obviously, probably I would say soon. A couple weeks for sure. They should have some in stock. So yeah, that's if it's performing like an RTX 2070, then this is definitely a great deal. Okay, because a GTX 1080 was going for $499, and an RTX 2070 performs better than a GTX 1080. So now you're getting RTX 2070 performance for $100 less. Now, I don't know how anybody can complain about that. I think it's just silly to even complain. Like, there's no reason to complain at all. But anyway, let's move on. So I'm going to keep this up because I want to compare the 2070 to it. So let's move on here to the 2070, and then I'll compare it to the Super. Excuse me, my nose is getting stuffed up. Okay, so now, well, I don't know, this Founders Edition. See, this is going to be a Founders Edition, I guess. I'm not sure though. I would assume it's a Founders Edition here on the 2060 Super. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about the clock speeds right now. That's not really that important. Because they're all pretty much the same. And they'll all boost clock pretty high depending on the power restrictions. I mean, so that's the least of, my concerns here. So, okay, so the RTX 2070 had 2,304 CUDA cores. Now the 2060 Super has 2176. So, it's not much of a difference. It's less than 150. So, pretty close. Now these RTX ops, the 2060 has 41 and the 2070 had 42. So, the regular one, the reference spec. Now apparently the Founders Edition could do 45, which kind of weird. I don't really get that. But anyway, it doesn't tell you how many actual RT cores are on here. But whatever. Now the gig arrays, the regular 2070 could do 6 gig arrays a second, so can the 2060 Super. And pretty much this is on par. The 2070 and the 2060 Super are pretty much the same there. So that's why pretty much that you can look on paper and see that the 2060 Super is very close to the 2070. So it's no surprise that this is performing nearly as well as this, you know. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move from the 2070. We're going to look at the 2070 versus the 2070 Super. Alright, kids are running around. They're kind of distracting me. Anyway. Alright, so here's the 2070. Now again, I don't know what I should compare it to. The Founders Edition or the 2070 regular, I don't know. So I'm just going to go with the reference spec here. I mean, compare it to whatever you want here. I'm just going to go from here. So the regular 27, as we said, had 2,304 CUDA cores, whereas the 2070 Super has 2,560. So, you know, that's roughly, what, 246 more or whatever it is. 256 more, I don't know. Something like that. So, so it has a, you know, pretty good bump in CUDA cores, not drastically different. The RTX ops, the 2070 was 42 or 45, depending on how you want to look at it. All the way up to 52 here, and it does 1 gigarray a second more. Or 2, yeah. So it does 7 gigarrays per second, whereas the 2070 does 6. There really isn't any change whatsoever in this. So this is always the part I don't understand about Nvidia. I mean, they could really, like, you know, as much as people complain about Nvidia, they can literally sweep the floor with AMD. Like, AMD really has no answer for Turing. Navi is not an answer to compete against Turing. I don't care what anybody says. You know, Nvidia can make this card series blow them out of the water if they wanted to, but I don't know why they're not doing that. You know, maybe they don't want people to complain about competition. I don't know. It's, if I was Nvidia, I would use AMD to mop the floor. You know, that's just me. But anyway, that's another whole thing. So, not as exciting of a difference compared to the 2060. But you can see that there is a difference here in the CUDA cores, so, and the amount of ray tracing that can be done. So you should see, you know, I don't really know how much 250 CUDA cores makes a difference in, because I don't know the calculations off the top of my head. But I mean, it should be a, you know, I guess a significant difference, but not a drastically different difference. But what I've heard online today and reading is that the RTX 2070 Super was performing nearly as good as the GTX 1080 Ti in performance. So that's pretty good. Now, I know that I would have known that already because I overclocked my EVGA XC Black Edition 2070 to perform almost near GTX 1080 Ti performance. Now that was quite a bit of an overclock, but I still was able to do it, you know, adjusting my fan curve and stuff, you know, to keep it cool. So it's no surprise to me that the Super card pretty much is on par with the GTX 1080 Ti, or at least very close. And from what I've heard, it beats out the Radeon 7, which I guess we already knew that anyway, because that was weaker than the 2080. Alright, so let's see the difference now between the 2070 Super versus the RTX 2080. All right, so I'm just gonna go through I'm just gonna compare the reference spec, okay? Because that's still pretty darn good card. Um, all right, so here's a 2070 Super and here's a 2080. Okay, now the difference between the 2080 and the 2070 Super is a little bit more than the obviously the 2070 to the 2070 Super. Um, so the 2080 has 2,944 CUDA cores, and the Super has 2,560. So that's nearly 400 CUDA core difference. Now the RTX ops are not terribly different. It's pretty much, I mean, the same distance virtually. Um, the RTX 2070 Super does 52 um, versus the 2080, which does 57. And the 2080 again is just bumped up by 1 on the gigarrays. It does 8 gigarrays per second, whereas the 2070 Super does 7. So, and the clock speeds again are kind of not relevant at this stage. Um, so, and all this is the same: memory speed, memory interface, memory bandwidth. So, and everything else is pretty much the same. The only difference here, I mean, there really isn't much difference. I guess it's pretty much all the same. So, it's not that far from a 2080. So that's what we saw from the benchmarks around the internet and stuff. So, um, but it's still, quite a bit more CUDA cores. So I guess that makes a big difference, that just a couple hundred CUDA cores. I'm kind of surprised it makes that much of a difference, but apparently it does. So let's go to the 2080 Super and compare the 2080 with the 2080 Super if they have it up here. Let's see. I assume they have the specs up here. Let me see. Okay, so this is interesting. Alright, so the regular 2080 has 2,944 CUDA cores, whereas the 2080 Super has 3,072. So that's not really a big difference in CUDA cores. It's like 100 and whatever, 130 or 140 difference. So that's not very much. And the RTX ops here, it says 57 for the reference model on the 2080 and 63 for the RTX Super. 2080 Super, they both do 8 gigarrays per second, so there really isn't any difference there, which again is disappointing. I'm not saying I don't like the card. I'm just saying Nvidia should have been just more aggressive in some areas. So I think they should have bumped up the CUDA count more. They should have made this maybe 9 or 10 gigarrays per second. Now there is a significant difference in the memory speed. So the 2080 has 14 gigabits per second on the memory speed, and on the RTX 2080 Super is 15.5 gigabits per second. Now I thought this was going to be 16, so I'm a little disappointed that it's only 1.5 gigabits per second faster. I mean, you got to look at the interface, but so now you have 448 gigabits per second versus 496. So again, I think that all this should have been higher and this should have been better. I don't understand. Now maybe they have a lot of RTX 2080 Ti's in stock and they didn't want to, undercut themselves as far as that goes, nonetheless, this is still going to be faster, you know. But I was hoping for at least this to be up into the 500s, like maybe 550 gigabits per second. Because the RTX 2080 Ti is like 600 and something. So let's go ahead and look at the RTX 2080 Ti versus the RTX 2080 Super. Now I have this card. I don't have the reference design, but I got the 2080 Ti. And I'm very happy with it. Like, very, very happy with it. So, the RTX 2080 Super, you can see, is significantly different than the 2080 Ti. You know, people don't understand, like, the enormous difference between them. I mean, they're always looking at, well, 30% this and 20% that and 15% that. I mean, it has nearly 1,300 more CUDA cores. That's significant. RTX ops on the base model is 76 versus 63 on the 2080 Super. This does 10 gigarrays per second, whereas this one does 8, so that's a bigger jump. And the memory bus speed is bigger. It's 352-bit. And memory bandwidth is 616 gigabits a second. So that's good, you know. Now, I know that people look at the AMD cards all the time and they're like, well, the 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 Radeon 7 does 1 terabyte per second in memory bandwidth. Well, that's because it's not really going to benefit. That's not really going to be a benefit in gaming. It might be a benefit in like whatever other kinds of calculations, like scientific calculations or whatever. I don't know, but it it's our. I mean, they've been doing that for years, making these gigantic memory interfaces. Um, so that's not the first time that they made like a thousand, whatever it is, 5,000-bit memory interface or whatever it is. They've done that with previous. AMD has done that with previous cards, and it really has done nothing for gaming performance. You know, it has helped with calculations, I guess, of some sort, but it doesn't really benefit. So this is like accurate raw power here. You know, this is all gaming right here, used for gaming. You know, so it's going to work well for frames per second. So the 2080 Super does 496, so it's well below the 2080 Ti. What I would have liked them to have done was they should have just modified the 1660 Ti, or excuse me, the 1660 series, the RTX 2060 series, and the RTX 2070 series. I don't think they should have even messed with the 2080 yet, until they already had a 2080 Ti coming down the pipeline, a new one. Because I don't think people were really like shooting for the 2080 or the 2080 Ti. I think people were kind of looking at the 1660 Ti, the RTX 2060, and the RTX 2070 because they were, you know, they were pretty good performers in their price range. So again, I don't know why they use this strategy. I don't understand it. But anyway, I'm going to make a prediction now. I think that they're going to bring out a GeForce RTX 2080 Ti Super, or convert the RTX Titan to the new RTX 2080 Ti, and then they're going to make a new Titan card out of the next generation or whatever, you know, because they could probably bump this up to like 5,000 CUDA cores, and they could give this one the 5.5 gigabits per second memory that this one has. And I would imagine that this will be well over 700 gigabits per second. Or excuse me, well over 700 gigabits per second. In fact, it might even hit 800 gigabits per second. And that will be real raw power to use for gaming. So that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that they make an RTX 2080 Ti Super. That's what I'm looking forward to, actually. So there's the differences. The 2080 Super is going to perform better than the regular 2080, obviously, just because of this bump in bandwidth here. And then remember, all these cards are going to be overclockable, I believe. So all the RTX Super cards you'll be able to overclock. So even if Navi 5700 or XT comes out, people said that they're going to overclock them, but they don't even know how much they can overclock them, because AMD in the past, their cards have always ran hot, you know. So I don't know if they're going to have the same amount of headroom that the Turing architecture has. But even so, if you overclock the RTX 2060 and the RTX 2070, then Navi is not going to be able to touch them. That's just my prediction. I mean, I don't know for sure because I don't know how good the Navi cards are going to perform. I mean, they didn't look that impressive during the AMD presentation, in my opinion. I mean, they were impressive compared to previous AMD cards. When you're comparing AMD to AMD, they were definitely a significant performance boost. But, the RTX cards have been out now for nearly a year, not quite, 8 months, 9 months. So they're already kind of like showed their stuff. And now the super cards are coming out. So AMD is going to have to do a lot of tweaking. I imagine they're going to try to, now that AMD can see the super cards, I'm guessing that if they do have something they're working on, they're going to do kind of what they did with the Radeon 7, where I'm not saying they're going to take like a commercial card or whatever, but what they did was they used what was available, which was their commercial cards, and they kind of jacked it up as much as they could, to try to compete with the 2080, which, I guess they succeeded. It just, for all that junk that's on it, it really just didn't perform the way that it was expected to. So I would say let's expect AMD to bring out maybe a 2080 competitor again with Navi, and put a ridiculous amount of memory on it for no reason at all, except for just to say we did it. They're just gonna do something gimmicky like that again. Big memory bus. Anyway, that's my take on this. Again, I'm happy with the Turing cards. I never had a problem with them. The RTX cards perform very well, even if they didn't have the RTX ray tracing and DLSS capabilities. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about the prices, did I? Well, basically, all the super cards are going to be the same price as their previous. So the RTX 2060 Super is the same price as the 2060. 2070 Super is going to be the same price as the 2070, except much better performer. Well worth the money. And the 2080 Super is going to be $699, and that's going to be performing, maybe between the 2080 and the 2080 Ti, but not quite. I would say it's probably going to be, 15% faster than the 2080. It could be more though with that memory bandwidth. I did forget about that. It could be 50%. It could be halfway there. And for $699, that's a good deal. So, yeah. And that's, I guess, for the reference cards, I'm assuming. I don't know. Not totally sure about that. They're just giving a price because it doesn't say Founders Edition here. So I don't know if this is just going to be your base price period or what. So, alright, anyway, Game Cooker US Rocks VR signing off. Thanks for watching. Peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Donate if you'd like to help out the channel. Any support, though, is appreciated. Peace. Have a great day. Bye.